Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order. It is 5:33. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 1. We're at City Hall Chambers. Today is March 12, 2024. With that, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody making time to be here during spring break. Hope everybody's having a good break. If you've got your kids home, you're enjoying that. With that, we'll go to the next item. Item 4 is minutes, approval of minutes for February 13, 2024. Those are in your packets. Yeah, let's do, thank you, Justin. Roll call. Tina or Ms. Ayala, would you help us with that?
Yes. Mr. Justin Heather?
Here.
Mr. Joseph Neb?
Here.
Ms. Rosario Cabello is out today. Mr. Wilfredo Martinez?
Here.
Mr. Jose Ceballos?
Here.
Ms. Carol Alexander?
Here.
And Ms. Vanessa Guerra? Here. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. I move to excuse Ms. Cabello from the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Justin. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? None. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We're off to back to the minutes. Whenever the board is ready, I'll entertain a motion to act on those.
Move to approve.
Been moved to approve by Mr. Neb,
Second the motion.
second by Mr. Martinez. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? None. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, next item is item 5, citizens' comments. Citizens are required to fill out a witness card no later than 5:45. Those can be found here on location. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. No more than 3 persons will be allowed to speak on any side of an issue. Speakers may not pass their minutes to any other speaker. Comments should be relevant to city business and delivered in a professional manner. No derogatory remarks will be permitted. As, Mr. Roque Haynes has signed up to make a public comment. Mr. Haynes, would you like to come up?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members. My name is Roque Haynes. I'm chair of Laredo Main Street. I just want to thank the TIRZ for all the hard work you've been doing with the downtown project improvements, and I'd especially like to thank the design team for all their hard work and contributions to the downtown revitalization effort. We at Laredo Main Street look forward to collaborating with you all on any way needed to enhance the beauty of our historic downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. I know that you're a longstanding advocate and supporter. You're at every event that involves, furthering downtown and its improvement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we're the next few items. So the thrust of this meeting was to spend time kind of understanding our financials, but there are a couple of items that are administrative and an update. So we'll go through those 2 first, and then we'll open it up to our financial workshop. Item 6 is update and discussion with possible action related to the Phase 1 TIRZ number 1 competitive procurement solicitation and a possible reposting of the solicitation. I understand that we did not receive any responses for a solicitation. If we can get Edward, would you like to update and Rick?
Sure. Good afternoon, Edward Ochoa with KCI. And so the solicitation went out, and the deadline was last Thursday at 4 p.m. And then there were going to be bid openings on Friday, but we were notified that there were no bids that were submitted. So visited with Rick, and I visited a little bit. We visited with Mr. Chavez at engineering also. So I guess just need to look at how we go about maybe resubmitting or republishing the package. So what I will say that we did, Rick and I again visited when we found that out on Friday, and we did reach out to several contractors that were interested in the bid, some that attended the pre-bid meeting and others that we heard that were interested, and we got some feedback from them we wanted to see, why didn't you bid on the job or what the issue was. It seemed to be that an issue that maybe several contractors had to do with kind of their bonding capacity and the length of time of the contract. So again, knowing what the budget is and the length of time, we had it set up as a 12-month contract, of course, for all 9 blocks. Some of the contractors that we see normally bid the downtown sidewalk projects normally work smaller projects. Downtown projects aren't as expensive as this was. And so, their bonding capacity, they were a little concerned about tying up their money for such a long period of time. So, one suggestion that I think we heard from one contractor was, would you consider maybe bidding them out as smaller sections? So that we can maybe have a smaller bid, a smaller bond, and a shorter period of time that ties up our money. So, again, we looked at it and talked a little bit, and, certainly would like to maybe make that recommendation, or we're certainly open to some other ideas from the TIRZ board. I know originally we had talked about the project from the very beginning, the whole 9 blocks that the board had approved and the budget that they had for that. And, we talked about the advantages of, bidding the whole thing out, order of scale, you get better unit prices when you're doing more things, right? Or a better unit cost, I'm sorry, for when you're doing more things. So, that's certainly the reasons why I think we had all considered doing it in that manner. But, knowing what we know or what we heard, some of the feedback that we had, a lot of these contractors are also very busy. I don't know, Rick, if you want to add what you heard from anything different.
Yes, good afternoon, Rick Solis with Able City. Yeah, that was the prevailing comment that we got, was that one, that would tie up their bonding. 2, these are smaller contractors that we're dealing with because they're sidewalk contractors or concrete contractors. Their bonding capacity isn't as big as, say, a large GC would have. So I think part of the allure of this project was that we were hoping to get some of the smaller contractors, one, because they don't have as much overhead as a larger one. So there's like that trade-off between larger GC that wants everything versus smaller GCs that want little pieces of it. So again, that was the comments that we heard.
I'd like to, before we invite the board for questions or comments, I'd like to ask our city engineer, Ramon Chavez, if he has any advice for us or any insight.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Ramon Chavez, city engineer, for the record. So we've been discussing this not only internally, but also with Edward and with Rick as soon as we found out that there were no bids. So we have come up with, I guess, some suggestions, perhaps breaking down those sidewalk segments into different projects, and or also providing some alternative or setting up a base bid for a certain block that the TIRZ board may be interested in focusing here in the immediate, and then do the rest as alternates to see how those numbers come in. And then at that point, once you set up a base bid, then you'll have the ability to award any additional work that we feel that we are comfortable with and that we also have funding for. So those are some of the initial comments that we've been discussing with the consultants.
Okay. Board, any comments or questions, feedback before we entertain action on this item?
Help me understand the value of, say, 3 individual bids for each street versus the base bid? What's the sort of advantage and disadvantage of those 2 options?
I guess if I understand your question is more like, if we bid them into, let's say if we bid the 3 segments individually and end up with 3 contractors, is that?
Yeah,
well,
that would be sort of the, I would say, disadvantage.
Yeah, correct.
That versus, a base bid, but it also means we can break ground. So I'm just trying to see what your thoughts are on pros and cons, so we can.
Yeah, so I mean, I know we had discussed this several times. I don't know if it was, off the record discussions, before about, how could we lay this out, And so certainly, you know, breaking them up into three segments, let's talk about the segments, how we broke them up, which was Zaragoza, San Agustin, and Iturbide. So if we broke them up into those three segments, if you put three projects out simultaneously, you could get three bidders. You could have a bidder maybe bid on all three projects, but I think if he bids on all three projects, he's running the risk of winning all three projects, and he's back to, I think, the same situation, right? Not having the bonding capacity or the availability in time. So, I mean, and then the advantage there too, I think one discussion one time, if I recall, was, you know, if you had one bidder for the whole 9 blocks, and you would get, you know, a similar product, right? You know, similar construction product, or their way of building things, right? So that would look the same. So, I mean, there's certainly those advantages and disadvantages, I think, one way or the other. But I really think now, you know, hearing that feedback, if we really want to break ground, we might need to maybe treat this a little bit more as is, you know, let's pick a segment and put that segment out. So that allows us to start on something.
We'd still have the bonding issue, the tightness on the bond, but because we're only doing 1, 2, or 3 blocks as opposed to all 9, that would be less of an issue for smaller contractors.
So yeah, so for example, segment 1, we had that set up as our blocks 1, 2, and then 10, which was the monument sign at the end of Zaragoza, and then block 11, which was the IT sign, just the infrastructure around it. So that's really mainly 2 blocks, and I think budget-wise that would fall much less. It would be less than $1 million for sure for those 4 blocks, let's call them. And so that seems to fit into what we're getting is the availability of certain contractors that normally bid these downtown projects. So,
Edward, just to be clear, so there wasn't any issue over understanding the work and what's involved? That was not central to...
I asked that question very specifically to one contractor that I spoke to. I said, you know, was there any, you know, issues on how we laid out these segments or how the bids were, how we wanted you to bid on it? And he said no. He said it didn't. I said, was it overly complicated? I mean, were we overthinking how we broke this down? You know, please tell me. I mean, we can certainly clean up things. He said no, that wasn't really the issue. He just said, you know, it really seemed a little bit more like, you know, it just seemed like it was going to be too much from their bonding capacity. And again, like Rick said, and I think, you know, Ramon is familiar with this. It seems like all the same contractors usually bid in these downtown sidewalk projects, and they're mostly concrete, you know, concrete guys that do that.
And we have used them before, these guys.
Certainly, yeah.
We're okay with them.
Certainly, yes, sir. I mean, I'll let Ramon speak for that more than I can. But I mean, I've done a couple of sidewalk projects over the years, and have dealt with some of these contractors, and you know, they've done good work. So yeah, certainly, I didn't. The guys that we spoke with are not anybody that we've had issues with previously.
I would like to follow the advice that all of you are giving, and specifically, Mr. Chavez, your advice to segment it in a way that we have 2 alternates following one primary project, and then they still disclose costs, right, for the alternates, so you still get to see that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, also, one of the unique things about this project is that it's not your typical request for bids where we will award to the lowest responsive bidder, but rather it's a request for proposals. And part of those will also allow us to look at not only their qualifications, their success, their company stability, but the price as well. And those are factors that were structured into the solicitations. So I think those that will be an advantage once we these responses, these proposals come in.
All right. I would like to make that in the form of a motion that we proceed in that manner and we establish the Iturbide monument. Is there a recommendation on where to start? Or because I would like to see the Iturbide monument be part of that first phase for pricing purposes.
So I mean, that's totally up to the TIRZ board. Let me explain how we have it segmented, and then you know, maybe if we can keep it within the same segments, that would be helpful. There was a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that was organized, whether it was the online system or how we set up the bids. We did it up, we broke up quantities into segments. That'll make our ability to get packages out for bid much quicker. If we try to break them up by blocks, for example, we'd have to go back in and redo quantities by blocks, right? So I would say segment number 1 was the Zaragoza. We call that Zaragoza Street. So that was block number 1, Zaragoza from Salinas to Convent. Block number 2, Convent to Flores. Then that one also included what we call the end of Zaragoza and Santa Ursula, which there was just going to replicate the monument. We call it the guard shack, kind of looking monument on the north side, replicating that on the south side, and providing power service to that. So that was that improvement. We call that block 10. And then block 11 was what we call the improvements around the IT sign. So the IT sign, I believe, Rick, was getting bid out as a separate project. The sign itself was getting bid out as a separate project.
You're still in number 1, right? Segment
Yes,
one.
that's all segment 1, yeah. Yeah, I just want to explain what they included, what those 2 blocks, because they're very unique. Block 11 was the improvements around the IT sign, which is right at the end of Iturbide and Santa Ursula, right at that corner where the Ueta stand is. So that's segment 1. Segment 2 was the 2 blocks of San Agustin, which is essentially the Alto to Tangelo Parkway. That was segment 2. And then segment 3 was the 5 blocks of Iturbide. So 5, 6, 7. So basically from Santa Ursula all the way to Salinas. Yeah, Salinas.
I mean, I would start in the order you presented. I mean, that seems well enough. It includes the big sign, which
Yeah,
we're
the
all
sign
very
one,
interested
yes,
in
sir.
seeing built.
Yeah, and I think, just so I can get clarification on that, so we would set it up as segment 1 being the base bid, Ramon?
Yes.
And then segment 2 could be set up as an additive alternate, right? So that would be, hey, bid on segment 2. If we've got money, we can award that, right? And then segment 3 would be a second additive alternate, right? So,
Are you recommending another 30 days? Do you have a recommendation on a period, or you feel we can move faster?
if we did it as additive alternates, the plan set could stay the same.
Right.
It would be one title block. And so the plan set could be presented the same, in my opinion. Ramon, it would just be some of the bid documents would have to change so that we can word it in that manner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's going to depend on how much we have to amend the plans, but other than that, I mean, we'll be ready. Everything's already in the system.
I'm saying the solicitation period.
Yeah, and
30 days.
that's something that we discussed also. I discussed it with Edward. And I think we should be able to go the minimum either 15 or 21 days at most, in my opinion. Because these contractors have already seen the project is not changing much, is rather just breaking it up maybe a little bit more than what it initially was. And so, in my opinion, we go the minimum 15 or 21 the most.
All right.
21 days.
All right, so I would say 21 days, just to give you a little bit of room to make any changes. I'll make that motion that we do this in the form of alternates and offer a 21-day solicitation period with at least one additional invitation for comments with the contractors, Q&A.
So Rick kind of brought up a point in thinking about it. So if we had a base bid and additive alternates, are the contractors required to bid on the additive alternates? And if they do, if they bid on it, does that put them in the same predicament that they're bidding on the whole plan, right?
Exactly.
Could you
Yeah.
have different awards for the alternates where you don't force them to grab a bond immediately?
I need to think.
Yeah, that's something that I'll have to look into, perhaps with just procurement or legal. But if you can just allow us to at least set it up in that way, and if there's any way that we can work this best, we will incorporate it into the solicitation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. But that was kind of a good point. Now that I'm thinking about it in my head, the contractor's putting a base bid and then an ad alternate and then an ad alternate, so he's still
in the same boat.
still might be in the same boat. I mean, he's basically, we would have to decide if we'd limit it to a certain amount.
The other thing I mentioned on a call with you, Edward, was if the project one is that segment one is delivered, well, his bond, his financial, not the performance, financial side of it releases, it captures the next project, right? So that gives them some ability to do other work. That's maybe something that they could visit with their bonding company about.
Okay.
So there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Heather, any additional discussion?
Are we gonna limit, we're gonna make the maximum 15 days? I mean, you said there's already,
We said 21 days.
And it'll still come to us at the next meeting.
Yeah, it still would come for action.
If everything works the way we think it will.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? None motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you for all that work in getting us to this point.
Thank you.
Item 7 is discussion possible action regarding invoices submitted by Able City and KCI. I didn't see any. Are there any in the packet?
Yeah, I think there's
just for case.
KCI.
KCI has a this is invoice 20 for the record.
I move to get it paid, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by Mr. Martinez to approve the invoice as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Alexander. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? None motion passes. Thank you very much. Item 8 is the financial workshop part of this meeting. Presentation by the City of Laredo Finance Department of the financial condition and expenditures of the TIRZ number 1, with possible action on budgetary items being discussed and presented. So before we start, I want to thank everybody that put a lot of effort into getting us these statements and formulated. Ms. Zavala, thank you. Ms. Martinez, Ms. Ayala, thank you so much for your work. I know you worked pretty hard, including over the weekend, to try to get ready for this meeting. So thank you all for the work. And Ms. Cabello that met with us as well before she left. Everybody involved from the city thank you so much. So what I'm proposing to do is to ask Ms. Zavala to kind of go through the financials, the official financial statements as of the end of February. And those are in your packet. They're, your typical accounting statements. And then we can go through other information just to update the board. And as we go along, we'll hold our questions for Ms. Zavala, and then we'll do basically more Q&A and discussion after she presents. Thank you, Ms. Zavala. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Like the chairman mentioned, these financials are as of February 29, 2024. So anything after or that is in the works will not be in these financial statements. I would like to begin with the balance sheet. It should be in your packet. And the first item is equity and investment pool in the amount of $1,005,071. This is basically money from operations. And when I say operations, you'll see it in your income statement. It's where we record property taxes. So it's property taxes basically and revenues derived invested. That $1,005,071. Then we go to your taxes receivable. They're $34,748. These are taxes that are still due to the city as of February 29 that we haven't collected yet. The third item is investments of $2,537,172. Those are investments from the bond proceeds that are being invested right now because we haven't used them yet, for total assets of $3,576,991. Your liabilities is accounts payable in the amount of $41,925. These are for invoices that are pending to be paid out as of February 29th. It was just 2 for Able City and KCI, but I checked, and as of March, they have already been paid out. Deferred revenues of $34,748. This is the offset of taxes receivable, just basically for the taxes that are still due to the city, for total liabilities of $76,673. We go to our fund balances, which is reserved for encumbrances, and you will see right now in your income statement, it's $56,112. Those are for contracts or purchase orders that have been issued to vendors, and it's basically 2. It would be for our 2 vendors, Able City and KCI. Look, that's the encumbrance right there. We have our reserve for debt service of 157,300. These are a requirement that for the bond that we have to have 1 year of debt service payment in reserve to in case anything happens, we have it there to be able to make our payment. Under the unreserved category, you see designated for improvements of 2,463,507. That's the bond available balance, whatever is available from the bond. Where you see undesignated of 823,399, that's your available balance for operations, where you keep your property taxes, for a total fund balance of 3,500,318. If you like to move forward to the income statement number 1, income statement, first income statement you'll see is the one for operations. This is where we collect property taxes. And I would like to direct your attention to the column where it says year-to-date actual. You have an opening balance of 842,183. That is basically the result of our property taxes, interest, expenses from the end of FY23 that carried over to the opening of 24. So that's how you started the year. Then up to date, property taxes of February 29, 2024, you collected 237,731 in property taxes. Prior taxes of $951, penalty and interest of $566, and interest earnings of $16,206 for total revenues of $255,454, plus your opening balance, a total available of $1,097,637. From this, you subtract your expenditures. So far, as of February 29, materials and supplies, you had $291. In contractual services, which is where you pay your administrative fees, and so far we have a contract there for April City. You have expenses of $41,156 with an encumbrance of $10,080, and a debt service payment that was one of our interest payments that already went out on the amount of $64,919 for total expenditures of $106,366. This leaves you a closing balance of $991,271, not including encumbrances and debt service. On income statement number 2, which is your bond. The bond is an inception to date. So what you see reflected on inception to date is what it is from beginning to right now, to February 29. We got the proceeds, it's $2,235,000, a premium of $328,031, interest earnings of $175,902, and we had a commitment from the city, a transfer from LCBB of $80,000 for total revenues in the amount of $2,818,933. From there, you reduce your expenditure so far. It's the only expenses that we have as of February 29 is contractual services are in the amount of $248,460. And we have a pending encumbrance of $45,540. And the bond cost, which is the cost of selling bond that was back when it was sold, of $61,426 with total expenditures of $309,886. Your closing balance for the bond side is $2,509,047. If you subtract your encumbrances, then you have a $2,463,507, which matches with your balance sheet balance. I was also asked by Mr. Chairman to provide you the actual amount of properties received to date. It's also in your packet. Not print.
Sorry, this one was in there.
Oh, it's not in there? Oh, okay. Okay, so where you see the yellow highlighted area, this was derived from directly from the Project Plan and Reinvestment Zone Financial Plan. I think this was the projected amount that the TIRZ had expected to receive from revenue projections. So if you see the yellow from when they started 2019 to 2024, they had a projected amount for the city to receive of $2,829,035. And I believe that back then, they also expected the college or wanted the college to have some contribute revenues, right, a property tax. However, it has not materialized, or the college, if you see on the yellow, on the green columns, you can see the actual property taxes received for the city from 2018 to 2024 of 1,544,346.69. And the college, we haven't received any property taxes. So if you take a look at what you had expected of 4,295,000 to what you actually received, you can see you are a little on that deficit. Yes.
Very good. And are you done with your statements, or is that?
That's it. Any questions?
Any questions or feedback? So I really, that sheet out, Mr. Heather had brought it up to me, putting that on the line chart, or the way it's pretty clear. What's really interesting, right, what happened after the COVID year was higher than the latter years, which is interesting. It'll be probably difficult to figure out, but there's probably some information there that would tell us what's going on. But ultimately, there's a reduced escrow coming in lately, so it's important for the board to capture that and understand that, the implications of it, which means we just have to work harder to continue redeveloping. Ms. Martinez mentioned something interesting during our prep meeting, is that perhaps the NEZ is having an impact the first 5 years if there's activity through the NEZ, which I don't see that as a negative anyway, because I think eventually that will catch us up with the tax-based improvements eventually. So.
And I know good evening, Tina Martinez, Community Development Director. I do remember we had that conversation, so I did request some information on NEZ. Again, trying to figure, what are the factors that might have affected our projections or even our reduction, right? The reduction that we're actually receiving. But NEZ was not a factor. We actually, I asked the building department to give me some statistics on how many applications had gone in, and the only application that had gone in was from a nonprofit that wouldn't even have generated to begin with. So there was no impact from the NEZ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can I?
Go ahead,
Will you put that? I don't see that very interesting slide with the actual this. This is not printed right in our packet.
Correct.
Could I get a copy of this?
It was emailed.
It was emailed.
Oh, okay. I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
Yeah. I think my question is not, it's maybe for everyone is,
Yeah.
This whole plan was
Thank you.
prefaced on the notion that the college was going to come in for a percentage. Okay, that didn't materialize. I get that. But if we think that we're going to maintain only collecting 45% of our projected revenues, you're going to have 17 million less than the 32 or 36 that we have as the city. Should we be going back and revamping the project and finance plan for the zone? Because if it's going to cost us $1 million to do phase 1 and $1 million to do phase 2, and phase 3 is the same thing. Now we're talking, we've got 9 blocks done with 3 million, and we only have 10 or 12 left, 15 maybe. Should we go back and revisit that?
That's a good point. And the answer is yes. I think for me, the answer is yes, we should. Even just to be realists, we should. This is, I think, the start of that exercise is making sure everybody understands what the finances look like. I agree, we should.
Unless we get another bond.
Well, the issue with that is that the increment's not showing we can cover that debt service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on the statements?
Well, maybe not without the participation of with other taxing entities, The city's not the only one that collects taxes for the properties that are in the same space, right? And so if we could coordinate some participation.
That's correct, yeah.
Coordinated efforts for our downtown that belongs not
To
just
everybody.
to the city, right, but it belongs to the county, belongs to the school district.
True. Yeah. I think those two topics certainly need to be revisited in the short order.
I think some of it is just the learning, the learning curve. Laredo Main Street went yesterday to the county to invite them to Jamboozy, plug for Jamboozy, March 23rd. And the commissioners were very receptive to the idea of redeveloping downtown.
Yeah, oh, so we probably should follow up. We can set up that meeting soon with them. I think they start seeing some actual physical improvements, that'll even be more encouraging for them to join in. Okay.
Chairman, we also included 2 other spreadsheets of some of the encumbrances you have. I don't know if you want to discuss those.
Yes, please, if you could put those up.
So I'll start with your, so this is your revenue account. And it's basically adds to what Ms. Zavala just spoke about, your starting balance, the expected revenues, and we just put it in a different format. The expenditures that you see there are some of the projects that you've already committed to. So I just want to, make the board aware. You have your wayfinding project that you've committed 100, your mural project, and then even the downtown safe sidewalk improvement project with the MPO. So when you start looking at your actual available uncommitted balance, you're up 468,000.
Right. Okay.
And then on the, well, I don't know if you want to see the bond one.
I have a couple of comments, and I know Juan Mendiva is in the audience. Thank you, Juan, for joining us. So with the amount that's set aside for that Salinas Improvements MPO Tech Stop program, that's $250. That's our 20% off of the 1.25 project cost. That will probably be reduced. But I think, we've said it, at least I've said it before, is keeping at that amount. I don't know, Juan, if you have any updates for the board or anything you'd like to share in relation to that match.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Juan Mendive, Director for the Laredo Webb County Area MPO. Yeah, we're still waiting to hear from TxDOT with the numbers. I know there's a pending meeting, but I believe the percentage reduction that you would get if you qualify for the economically disadvantaged program, you would only be responsible for 8.2% of the cost, and the state would put the rest. I know I had spoken to you before, right, that there's some, some parameters that they're looking at, and they're looking at the numbers. We're going to propose some different scenarios on how the funding breakdown could look to see if that's beneficial to you, and that way the credit could apply.
Yeah. So for the board, if you're looking for any sort of cash, it would appear there once we actually have an advanced funding agreement.
Correct.
And that probably could be introduced into whatever the board decides is worthy down the road. Any questions for Ms. Martinez on this worksheet or comments? You have another worksheet, the status on KCI, right? Or bond, it's entitled bond account.
Yeah, so we did the same breakdown for your bond account. So your opening was 2.8. There is an active PO for KCI with some amendments that have been done to that contract. Your bond cost, the payment that has to be done, and then the wayfinding money from CVB was added to this project. So it's also it's added to your opening balance. So then I reflected it on your expenses. So your committed balance there is 469 already. So you have available 2.3.
Yeah, and I took a note of the 16.2. I think we used up some of those interest earnings at the last meeting, right?
Yes.
So I think we'll make that adjustment. Any questions on that update? Does everybody feel we've got a grasp of where we are? I think it's good. I mean, I think we're going in to award the next project. Maybe our revenues for, I think, matters largely out of our control, COVID and other distressed issues in downtown. I think holding some cash is good. Mm-hmm. In terms of where we go from here, I think understanding our finances and formalizing that advanced funding agreement for phase 2 will be important. The other topic for me is understanding too. We've kept our design period and extended at an extended period. It's gone on for about 2 years, and we've got KCI pretty much under commitment for expenditures based on a contract. But in terms of our administration and anything else that the board wants to do with Able City, I would suggest that we capture that in the form of a work authorization instead of having this open-ended, because we can't be open-ended when you have a finite amount of money. And I think that'll be important going forward. Doesn't have to be dealt with today, but I think it'll be important to ask them to come back with some, in my head, it's a not to exceed for the services they're rendering, so that this board can actually say, we've got so much. As we spend more than we presented to the board actually in May of 2022. We've exceeded our design and administrative expectations. So all of you have that information. It was shared over email. So that's important as we go back is to come back with some defined expenditures for both administration if we need it still. If we don't need it, then we can make that decision. And anything else in terms of design that's left over and lingering, pin it down so it's not open-ended, because I think being open-ended for an extended period of time is very costly, and you all have seen that. So those are my comments. If anybody has anything else.
The only other thing that I'm thinking on top of that, you just mentioned the interest income that we used last month to sort of offset the cost of the wayfinding and the monuments. We talked about sponsoring those and we're issuing that out to the private industry to sponsor that. I think we ought to, I don't know what the city requires for that, because that'd be a gift or is it an RFP or what, but if we could maybe in the next month or so start formalizing that process and getting folks in, because we clearly, need every dollar we can, kept it within the TIRZ, and if there's interest, then we should definitely get that out there and get that sort of funds coming back into the TIRZ.
I agree. Correct. Any other comments?
No, I'll just go off of that a little bit too. In the plan, it discusses the private-public partnerships. And so I don't look at it as a donation or sponsorships. I look at it as that relationship that needs to happen. The whole idea about the tiers is to generate the private investment back in. So in my mind, I think that would be the best way in going through and verifying with the college or the county as to whether or not they're willing to participate in the tiers. And if not, then I would just suggest following Justin's idea about we amend our plans accordingly.
Okay.
So
I'll sit with you and in between this and the next meeting, kind of talk through the financing plan, see how we can get that worked out and updated. The last thing is really, and I see some folks that have kind of followed this whole thing throughout, is for the city in the past, we've gone and tried to mesh incentives that are not TIRZ related, that are basically just income boosts for redevelopment. I really think we need to go back with the EDA and our economic development director and see if we could ultimately, deliver some sort of assistance to the TIRZ. It's not going to happen out of the tax base right now. So I know I'm imposing in those comments, but I think it's important that the city look at additional revenues outside of the TIRZ to incentivize. I'm talking about residential units, things that are going to develop into rooftops and an income base that's more sustainable. So, I mean, I'll put that on you. I guess you haven't experienced that those proposals coming to you yet, but I really would like to revisit that through the Economic Development Office and see if we can incentivize that per unit. So the idea is like 10,000, 12,000 per unit developed downtown. That's an example of a residential package. We certainly need to revisit that. All right, I think that covers. Does everybody feel up? I already asked this, but any last comments before we go? Or if everybody feels accomplished with the budget? Anybody else in the audience or from staff before we close? We're good? Okay, we're good. All right, then. With that, then I think that's the last item.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. I'll second that. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? None. Motion passes. We're adjourned at 6:17. Thank you very much.